Morning, everyone. Previously, we were talking about making of the Indian Constitution, and we have seen challenges before constitutional makers, as well as few of the advantages we have seen yesterday in the last session. Right. So many a times I said constitution makers. So the question is, who then were the constitution maker of the Indian Constitution? Generally, people know about Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar because we call him father of the Indian Constitution, and many people have idea like Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar framed our constitution because we call him father of the Indian constitution. But let's see the reality. Who were they? Who were the makers of the Indian constitution? So basically, the drafting of the document called the constitution was done by an assembly. It's not like one person's task. Constitution drafted by assembly. Number of people were there. So it was an assembly of elected representatives called the Constituent Assembly. This assembly called the Constituent Assembly. Assembly of elected representatives. So basically elections to the Constituent Assembly were held in 1946, way before independence. Right, because 1946, July 1946, more than a year. So its first meeting was held in December 1946. But here's it, elections to the Constituent Assembly held in July 1946. But there wasn't democracy, then how did they hold elections? Yes, elections were there during the colonial era. But voting rights were limited. Like present day we discussed before that universal adult franchise, that time it was 50. And in July 1946, election to the Constituent Assembly were held. Then December 1946, the first meeting of the Constituent Assembly was held. But soon after it, the country was divided into India and Pakistan, partition, right? So the Constituent Assembly also divided, right? Many members of the Constituent Assembly that remain in the Indian side, many were left for Pakistan, right? So the Constituent Assembly was also divided into Constituent Assembly of India and Constituent Assembly of Pakistan. The Constituent Assembly that wrote the Indian Constitution had 299 members. Now, if we talk about that Constituent Assembly of India, that members, 299 members were there. In the Constituent Assembly, 299 members were there. The Assembly adopted the Constitution on 26th November. Remember, listen it carefully. The Assembly adopted the Constitution on 26th of November 1949. Adopted. However, it came into effect on 26th January 1950. Right? To mark this day, we celebrate January 26th as Republic Day every year. So on 26th of November, the Constitution of India adopted, however, came into effect by 26th of January 1950. And to mark this day, we celebrate on the 6th January as Republic Day every year. Got it? Adopted 26 November 1949 and came into effect 26th January 1950. 1950. So this is about the Constituent Assembly. More, let's say about more, but before we go further, there is a question. Every year we celebrate 26th of January as Republic Day. So there is a question that why should we accept the constitution that made by this assembly more than 70 years ago, right? 1950 came into effect, and today you know that 2021. So about 70 years, and we still accept that constitution, which is older than 70 years, made by this constituent assembly. So we have some reasons to understand this. Let's discuss about those reasons. So we have reasons. We have already noted one of them. The Constitution does not reflect the views of its members alone, like we had discussed before. Right? It expresses a broad consensus of time. Many countries of the world have had to rewrite their constitution afresh because the basic rules were not accepted to all social groups or political parties within countries. So many of the countries uh, have to rewrite a fresh constitution. But no, that is actually an achievement of the Indian Constitution. So today, with the same respect, we accept our Constitution. So here, reasons are there, right? For many countries, Constitution exists as a mere piece of paper. No one actually follows it. Many countries like that. But the experience of our Constitution is totally different. We homage to our constitution. We pay homage to our constitution. We give respect to our constitution. Right. Over the last half of century, more than actually half of the century, several groups have questioned some provisions of the constitution. When something was wrong in our country at that time, we blame either government or sometimes in some cases we blame actually a particular provision of the constitution, right? This constitutional provision is not good. Sometimes we criticize like that criticize in the sense basically we express our opinion, right? But no large social group or political party, even not individual, has ever questioned legitimacy of the constitution. We never put a question mark before the constitution. Yes, sometimes we feel that a particular provision of the constitution that is inappropriate, certain kind of opinion we express, but we never question mark on legitimacy of constitution. And this is unusual achievement, right? Of course, it is unusual achievement. Actually, it's unusual for any constitution. That's great that, okay, we have some problem. We not agree with particular provision, particular article of the constitution. That can be changed. However, we never question our constitution itself. We always pay respect to legitimacy of the constitution. So that is actually an achievement, right, for any constitution. That reason I think is enough to prove that why you still accept the constitution, right, made by the Constituent Assembly more than 70 years ago. Okay, apart from it, we have one more reason. The second reason for accepting the constitution is that the Constituent Assembly represented the people of India. Earlier, we have seen there were 299 members, and election to the Constituent Assembly. Election to the Constituent Assembly was held in December 1946. That means members of the Constituent Assembly were not joining themselves. were not appointed by British or any other political party. However, those people were elected members, elected representatives. So that time there was one drawback. That means, as I said before, there was no universal adult franchise at that time. Before the constitution, there was no universal adult franchise. So, of course, the people, members of the Constituent Assembly, were not elected by all the people of the country, right? So, the Constituent Assembly could not have been chosen directly by all the people of India. However, it was elected mainly by the members of existing provincial legislature. That time, British time, provinces there, like present day we call states. So those elected members of provincial legislatures elected members of Constituent Assembly. So this ensured fair geographical share of members from all the regions of the country. So of course, elected by those members of the existing provincial legislature. So those legislatures belong to different geographical regions. So that means fair share of geographical regions in election process. Right? Second, the assembly was dominated by the Indian National Congress. The Constituent Assembly is dominated by the Indian National Congress. Why? Because that political party led India's freedom struggle. It was the largest, and I would like to say one and only party. Yeah, there were many numerous small parties were there. After it, Muslim League and other, but the largest one, the Indian National Congress. So obviously, most of the members of the Constituent Assembly, they were belong to Indian National Congress. But the Congress itself included variety of political groups and opinions. That is a remarkable thing. It's not like that in Indian National Congress, only members of particular group or particular caste or particular community or from particular regions were there. However, Congress included people from all different social groups. So those people had their own view. So the assembly had many members who did not agree with Congress. In many cases, they were not even agree with Congress. In social terms also, the assembly represented the members from different language, different groups, different class, different castes, right? As well as different religions and occupation. This assembly not represented members of different, not particular group, but different group. Right? Even if the Constituent Assembly was elected by universal adult franchise, its composition would not have been very different because the Constituent Assembly already had diversity diversity members because members from different region, different occupation, different belong to different castes, different social classes, different economical background, right? And even they were different in their expertise. So, for an example, member from Bharuch was that Kanhaiya Lal Manik Lal Munshi, as well as many members like Sardar Patel and other from Gujarat itself, as well as from other states too. So here we can say that there was diversity in the Constituent Assembly. That's great for us because it added different views of different people. So finally, The manner in which Constituent Assembly worked gives sanctity to the Constitution. The Constituent Assembly worked in systematic, open, and consensual manner. It wasn't like that constitution drafted by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, like many people believe such kind of myth. But no, the Constituent Assembly worked in systematic, open, and consensual manner. So first, some basic principles were decided and agreed upon. Then a drafting committee, the most important committee in the Constituent Assembly. So the drafting committee, chaired by Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, prepared a draft constitution for discussion. So first of all, basic principle decided, then drafting committee draft the constitution. Yes, drafting committee, the most important committee, chaired by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, and he played an important role in all this process. That is why we call him father of Indian Constitution. So the committee actually, drafting committee prepared the draft of constitution for discussion. So several rounds of through discussion took place on the draft. More than 2,000 amendments were considered. Discussion. The draft constitution that presented before the Constituent Assembly and the Constituent Assembly that discussed debate on different provisions of the Constitution. Hence, more than 2,000 amendments, changes were considered. The members deliberated for 114 days, span over 3 years. In 3 years, 114 days utilized by those members of the Constituent Assembly for deliberation. Then every document presented, every word spoken in the Constituent Assembly has been recorded and preserved. It's not like that behind the doors, sorry, closed door behind the curtains, they frame the Constitution. You know, whatever they discussed there, whatever document presented, as well as the words spoken by people, everything recorded and preserved. So even today, it is available. So these are called Constituent Assembly debates. These are called Constituent Assembly debates. When printed, such records, these debates were 12 bulky volumes. These debates provide the rationale behind every provision of the Constitution. These are used to interpret the meaning of the Constitution. Sometimes fail to decide exact meaning of particular provision. At that time, such documents can be used to interpret the meaning of the Constitution. So this is how Constitution made a part of the Constitution. Next session we shall discuss about guiding values of the Indian. If you have doubt, please go ahead, ask me.